channel Book Lovers. It is the book club, and we are streaming live from Harare. And today we have a special guest with us, whom I'm very excited to introduce to you, and that is Miss Ruramai Nyadzayo-Mugwisi. Ruramai, how are you?
Hi, Selina. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. As is my custom, Romai, I always start each live with a quote from another African author that I think captures the spirit of the person's work that I'll be discussing, or the author themselves. And tonight I've chosen a quote from Wally Soyinka, who is the first African writer to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. And it's very brief and very concise, and it goes like this: the greatest threat to freedom is the absence of criticism. And when I thought about that quote, and I read it, and I thought about, reflected on your book, and some of your observations about life, about culture, time, seasons, women, men, race, and faith. I thought, yeah, this is a book that looks at it critically, but with a great depth of compassion and wisdom. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our viewers. And if you are watching, whether from Facebook or YouTube, we would be happy to hear which country you are watching from. And if you have any questions for Ramai as we talk, please drop them in the comment box and we'll attend to them. But Ramai is a girl and women's empowerment champion. She's a poet as well and a spoken word artist. And she has brought us this offering, A Seed in the Dust, an African memoir, quite a substantial read, very, very poignant story. And she's also got many, many initiatives. She works in the digital content creation field. She's a medical scientist, and she's also a wife and mother. All right. So when I'm saying Ms., I'm saying Ms. MS, Ms. Ramai. Okay. And the book, yeah, this is quite a deep, deep book. Hi, Lucy. We've got Lucy watching us from Facebook. Thank you. And she's also saying hi to Ramai as well. So with so with that, hi y'all. That's Norman watching from Zoom from YouTube. Thank you for joining us, Norm. Okay, so without further ado, Ramai, tell us how A Seed in the Dust came about.
Okay. So language is a medium for expressing our emotions, thoughts, and beliefs, right? And words form the foundational matrix of that communication process. And I love words. I love how the choice of words and combined with the tonality of expression, how that communicates our deepest desires, our hurts, our hopes, and our dreams. And um, my journey to writing this book started when I was relatively young. I think I wrote my first book when I was 12. My first unpublished, unedited, but definitely peer-reviewed book, which I wrote for my friends, but the rest of the class ended up reading it and they liked it. Um, the reason why I wrote that particular book was it was my attempt at understanding the condition of young love in adolescence. I was late to join the party, and I became curious when I noticed my friends becoming different, so to speak, in the presence of young boys, you know. And because I was an only girl for almost 10 years, I could only relate to boys as my brothers or friends. So I started writing that particular book because I started questioning what they were going through. They explained what they were feeling, and then I took what they shared with me and I put it down into a story. I then went on to high school and I abandoned book writing at that point in time because I started leaning more towards short stories. But I think I knew at the back of my mind at a subconscious level that I was going to write a book, but I needed to grow into my own as a person. I needed this particular story to find me, and our stories, they find us. The books we write are about events which we understand in our own unique way, in order to effectively deliver the message behind the story. Because as events unfold and circumstances develop around us, how we respond becomes the story, because our response is who we are. It's a function of our thoughts, of our feelings, of our decision, of our actions. And that is the story that we find as we are telling our narrative, you know. And the story of Shumi found me when I was older, and I was able to then respond to it with the grace and sensitivity and wisdom which it required.
Wonderful and also deep. And we've got Faith Chiparashe Mukuku watching from Canada. Hey, Faith. And Lucy Garwe. Here is my shout out to you with a bit more passion. Selina, I need a better shout out. Hi, Lucy. We're happy to have you on the show. So, and we're happy that you are in the comment section. The support unit is strong. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining. And Ruramai, that was quite deep, that the response becomes the story. Very, very powerful. And when I think of the seed in the dust, that's really one of the major themes of the book, is how Shumi responds. But then your response to Shumi's response, in terms of writing this book, is very, very powerful. Rita is watching from the UK. Hey, Rita, we're happy to have you today, and we've got better connection and network today with the fabulous Ruramai with us, and so we're going to enjoy the chat we're going to have today. So Ruramai, tell us a little bit about this book in terms of memoir. So when we've been talking, I shared with you how much I love the format and genre of the memoir, and how I've always felt like, especially for Zimbabwean memoirs, they're always the ones we know about are always the ones written by white people. But you know, there are equally good, equally well written memoirs written about Black voices. And when we look at A Seed in the Dust, an African memoir, this is covering from the early 80s all the way through to 2021. In fact, to COVID season even. So tell me a little bit about why memoir, why you did this, and a little bit about what the book is about for people who haven't read it.
Okay, so A Seed in the Dust is literally a journey of one woman's becoming. And it starts off in her early childhood in pre-independent Zimbabwe. And so it's a truncated narrative of Shumi from an early childhood, blossoming into a young woman, who then becomes a fully fledged adult woman, who discovers her own power despite some really horrific experiences, unspeakable experiences, which happened to her. So it's an experience where the reader is immersed in her journey, literally. And we experience hope, we experience faith, we experience courage, and we experience love in spite of the hardships that surround her. At the end of the day, it's a channeling of her energy into this story that is meant to be relatable for anyone who picks up the book to read it, and get a glimpse of themselves, or a glimpse of their situation, or even circumstances that they may have encountered in their lives. And the reason why a memoir, a biography, so to speak, is because this is a story that I believed needed to be shared for the whole world to hear. We do not have enough, like you were saying, enough of the Black narrative in terms of memoirs in Zimbabwe. And I know sometimes when we think about the biography narrative in Zimbabwe, we tend to think of it in one context, that it leans in one way, especially when it comes to women, but there will be hardship, there will be adversity, but more than that, there is triumph. More than that, there is hope. More than that, there is self-compassion. More than that, there is gratitude in the process. And that just creates room for more, for abundance, even in one one's life, though they may be surrounded by lack and deprivation. So this is just a story that celebrates real life in Zimbabwe throughout real time. And it also celebrates a nation that is also on its own journey to becoming, from pre-independent Zimbabwe right through to the glory days of Zimbabwe, and to the economic downturn and the recession that we are facing as a nation, the hope that still is resident among its people and is still vibrant within our nation despite the hardships that we may face. So it's a story that looks at all aspects of life, of living in Zimbabwe. And I think that is relatable to a lot of people all over the world, because we encounter so many different things in our life. We encounter challenges. And so this is a story that says, you know what, challenges may come, adversity may come at you, but just hang in there. There is triumph at the end. If you do not just look at the conditions surrounding you, but look at the condition of the inner person.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think Shumi also, through her narrative, shares that with us. So very, very true. It's the story of a nation, as much as it is the story of a person, but also the story of a family, the family that Shumi originates from, the family that she desires and chooses to make for herself, and then the family she ends up with, which is, I believe, a meld of both. And we see like a wide range of diverse personalities and character flaws from people who are allies and supporters, and people who can sometimes be cold, who are sometimes misunderstood in seasons of her life, and turn around and surprise us in other seasons of her life. So you mentioned earlier faith, hope, and love. So the book is split up into 3 parts. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. So when I came up with the story outline, what happened is I sat down with Shumi and we had an interview where I recorded her as she spoke about her life and laid out the basic outline of what happened to her from the time she was born to date. And after that interview, I then had an opportunity to listen to it. And as I listened to it, I came up with a story outline of how the whole story flow would be captured. And because it it's set in such a wide timeline range, from the 70s right through to 2021, I decided to break it down into parts. And these parts were 3, which I then gave names, which is faith, hope, and love. And these parts captured different seasons in her life. And I named them faith, hope, and love because each season would basically be established based on what's happening in her life at that point in time. As a young child, she had faith for a better life. She had faith that her circumstances would not prevail when she was older. She had faith in her capacity and in the potential that she had. She had the dreams to be a world leader. She had faith that she could impact the world on some level. And then she grew up, and she now nurtured hope, because she'd been through some things and she needed to sustain that faith with a little hope, hope that put in the work, if she didn't quit, if she didn't give up, if she trusted the process, that everything would come together. And then eventually the last part of the narrative is love, where she is now a woman, and she experiences love in all its forms, love of the people who have hurt her, as she also goes through her journey of healing, love of self-forgiveness for the mistakes that she made, the situations that she ended up putting herself in, and love of even the love that was like the romantic love, when she falls in love, and even though sometimes that love did not work out as expected, she still embraced that love was everything that she really needed in life. And so I broke down the story into those three parts to capture the essence of her journey um, throughout the seasons of her life.
Definitely, and definitely when I think of the love section, which we're not going to try, we're not going to give too much away, because I know that there are some viewers who watch who are always like, Selina, don't, no spoilers. So I'm really going to do my best, okay? But the love section, is quite poignant, because some of the issues you spoke about, the issue of self-love, and I think it really comes down to self-acceptance, right? But also the understanding that true love, even a wholesome love, is not exempt from pain. Just because when you experience real love, pain will be inevitable because it's love. And that's what happens. It's almost how you know that you have experienced or you have received the gift of real love. So the book is very, very poignant, and there are characters whom you cause us to grow in love for throughout the whole process. We've got some more people joining. The comment section is hot, 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 with a lot of excitement from your fans. We have Wembai Angela Takawarasha, who has just joined us. We've got Derek Mkuku and Lucy are exchanging some very complimentary words about your vocabulary, Ruramai. And we've got a question from Rita Matanda about when we spoke earlier about women generally not being telling their stories. And she said, is it not because women are not supposed to, or are not given the opportunity to tell their stories? What's your take on that, Ruramai?
Okay, so I think for a lot of people, and men included, but since we're focusing on Rita's question, which is women are not allowed to speak about their struggles. Men as well sometimes find it very difficult to speak about their struggles. But looking at women, women are not allowed to speak about their struggles. I think to a certain extent there is some truth in that, especially if the struggle is enmeshed in shame. If the struggle is shrouded in things that people around us would consider unspeakable, then there is definitely a complicity of, let's be quiet about some of these things because there's shame associated with that. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the struggles that women face in life are not really of their own doing, or they're not situations that they brought upon themselves, but that have happened to them. It's something in the environment. It could be tradition, norms, practices, customs, whatever it is, but there's something that happens to a woman and causes her to struggle. And that struggle is associated with shame. And because it's associated with shame, therefore we do not speak about it. Therefore, we have to be silent about some of these things. And this is there in the book as well, when the women in this book are going through certain things in their lives and they can't speak up, they can't discuss the issues because there's that heaviness of the shame that is associated with their pain and with their struggle. But I think when we normalize giving language to shame and say, this has happened to me, but I feel afraid of rejection because of what has happened to me. When we give language to that shame, I think it takes away the bite of the shame, because it's like it disempowers the shame. So when we normalize speaking up, when we normalize having the boldness or the courage to ask for help from someone, and when I say speaking about shame, I'm not saying go on social media and talk about your struggle publicly. Find a safe space, find someone to talk to about the situations and the issues that you're struggling with, so that you can have a better handle on those things, because usually they negatively impact on your life, and they have an impact even on your ability to develop fully as a whole person. So when we begin to normalize speaking up, and talking about the struggles that we have to trusted confidantes, people that we know have got our back, people who will support us, then I think we disempower the shame. And when we disempower the shame, we take away the fear. And in its place, we replace it with faith and courage and self-compassion and grace to be able to say, you know what, I think I can proceed to the next level in my journey. As long as we don't talk about these things, we kind of get stuck in that situation, no matter how well we may look materially on the outside, externally, but as long as we are keeping these things hidden inside of us, we fester. And when we fester, we don't really grow, we stay stagnant. And the whole point of life is to grow.
Very, very powerful and very, very profound and true. And it's interesting that, you talk about the shame that is shrouded in silence. And one of the ways that comes out in the book is, I think it's as we are going through the transition from hope to love, and Shumi is discovering who she can be, and the potential and the power she has to impact other people's lives. And she creates a space within her work in Christian ministry where she helps women overcome that shame, and she becomes a place for women to speak of those things, and she then starts to speak out. And what I find so interesting about that picture and that aspect of her journey is that if you look right from the beginning, the people in Shumi's life are not people who have been given platform and space to give voice to their pain. Her father being one of those people who, when we first encounter him in the book, you give this description about his eyes and his charming nature and this intensity within that is always being controlled. But as life beats him down and, a system starts to constrain him, he becomes this other person. And it's tragic to watch. It's also quite compassionately told, because he is somebody whom we learn to both love and to hate and to be disappointed by. And yet when he exits the story, which he does in kind of like a slow exit, you begin to see that actually he was just a person who did not have the tools and the voice to deal with his pain. And you also see that his wife, Shumi's mother, also was somebody who did not have the tools and the voice to deal with her pain, even though she seemed more vocal and stronger and seemingly more, together than the husband. The biggest thing in her life, the biggest pain in her life, she never truly confronted. And I found that very, very interesting, because then when we look at Shumi as a character and her trajectory, a lot is shrouded in silence. A lot of the painful traumas she goes through, she processes through silence. And when it gets really intense, especially in her marriage, it begins with a war of silence. And it's very, very profound to me that then in coming to the place of love, in coming to the place of unpacking hope for herself, she found that by now starting to speak out and to give voice in the work that she was doing. And then the words came, like Mwana, for instance, I felt like was a powerful word that came, because she now was able to start to see and to name things and to start to put life and something out there that was going to combat a lot of the things that, she was seeing that she didn't, kind of co-sign, or the things that were hurting her, or, the things that she saw that needed to be resolved and fixed. So very, very powerful theme about silence and voice in the book, and how we see that in Shumi's story. Now, the comment section is hot. It's hot, Ruramai, with a lot of people saying some things.
Okay.
So maybe let's just catch up with them. Firstly, we've got Lucy saying the tragedies and the fact that all the men in her life, so that would be Shumi, exit through death, cheating, etc., and it's disappointment after disappointment. Is this what the African woman embodies? Is disappointment guaranteed? What would you say to that, Ruramai?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question. And I was having a conversation with my friend Rose the other day, and she said something really profound to me. She said to me, it's almost as though womanhood is synonymous with pain, especially for the African woman. And I think to a certain extent, when you look at the average African woman's story, it appears to be that way, that there's some level of pain, there's some level of trauma or hardship or difficulty associated with being a woman, with becoming a woman or growing into being a woman. But I think this is the reality of life in general, and life is going to be hard. Life, we are assured that life is difficult, that there are challenges in life, and that is the assurance that we have. Absolutely, when you were born, you are going to be born into problems, into issues, into hardships, into some form of adversity. But what we do with those set of circumstances that we encounter as we are growing, how we respond to those situations, then determines if our life is going to be one big disappointment. When we tell our stories, it's an opportunity to reframe our experiences and possibly change our perspective on what happened. I know there's some really difficult situations, some dysfunction that we can never normalize, and I'm not normalizing it or justifying it. But if it does happen, we have a choice, either to quit and give up on life, or to take a position and say, there's still something that I can get out of this situation in terms of who I am as a person. This is not how my story is going to end. This is not the final chapter. And so I get to be the creator of my destiny, even though something hard, something traumatic, something tragic has happened to me. But I still have the authorship, the ownership of how the story eventually concludes. It still lays firmly in my hands. So what am I going to do about it in spite of what has happened? Where justice needs to be sought, let's seek justice. Let's have those who need to pay for their crimes, pay for their crimes. But let us also recognize the fact that justice served in terms of getting someone arrested, or getting someone into to serve a term for their offenses, is not going to necessarily give us the healing that we want. That's still up to us. We still need to determine that for ourselves. So at the end of the day, we are still the creators of our own destiny. We are still the writers of our own lives. So what are we going to do about the disappointment that we're facing? What are we going to do about the pain that we have in our lives? What are we going to do about the betrayal? What are we going to do about the infidelity? What are we going to do about the tragedies that are playing out in our lives? And as long as we can answer and say, I still have some ability within me in order to address this situation, then I think our lives are not one big disappointment. Then I think our lives are not just one story of pain after pain after pain. There's courage, there's hope, there's triumph, there's love, there's celebration, there's success. You determine for yourself what that success is. It may be healing, it may be forgiving, but there is a different alternative to the conclusion that everybody around you will be telling you based on what is happening to you. Your life is not a reflection of the conditions around you. Your life is essentially how you are responding to those conditions around you. So what are you doing about the conditions around you?
Yeah. And I guess what is interesting is that you get the sense of you get different voices of Shumi coming through in the processing of past events. So whilst the chronological narration is telling us from her perspective as a 10-year-old girl or a younger girl, a teenage girl and an older girl and a married woman and a divorced woman and all throughout these different stages of life and development. There's also an aspect at which Shumi in the now is giving us her processed sort of stance on the events that have happened, which I find very, very interesting because that's always the challenge, right? With real life stories. Real life stories are often, you can sometimes come at something too early before you've processed it. And then all we get is raw pain. And we kind of struggle with the narrative. And then there's sometimes a certain distance that one needs, or in time or space, to come back and say, wow, okay, so this is what is going on. So we've got some more comments in the comment box, which are really, really hot on fire. Very interesting from Derek Mukuku. He says, I am not a frequent reader of memoirs or novels, but this one took me to different levels of emotion. I felt as if I was walking with Shumi all the way. Please note, I'm looking for Vusi. We need to talk man to man. Thank you, Derek. We'd all like somebody to talk to Vusi. Have a long talk with Vusi, right? Then Rita Matanda, faith, courage, and compassion. Thank you, empower to disempower. And then we've got Yolanda Nyadzayo who joined us, enjoying the inspiring interview. Well done. Thank you for joining us, Yolanda. We appreciate your comments. And then Lucy Ruramai. So can we expect another memoir or will you do fiction too? What's your response to that?
Okay, so I think because I'm an empath, I think I tend to gravitate towards memoirs, but that's not to completely rule out the possibility of fiction stories as well. I think what I love about memoirs is how real and familiar they can be. Although I know that fiction as you write fiction, you can make it relatable, really. But I love the beauty of memoirs in the sense that it gives us a glimpse into another person's journey, a real glimpse into their journey and what they had to contend with, and then what they did with circumstances. And I was thinking I would launch into another memoir, but this time from a male point of view. I had interesting feedback from the story, from Shumi's story, where we had a book review here in Chiredi, and men turned up, which I was very grateful for. And they spoke at great length how emotionally involved they were, like Derek is attesting to how emotionally involved they were with Shumi's journey. And one of the questions that came up there was men looking at Shumi's father and what he went through. Essentially, the way his journey ended the way it did was because he did not have an outlet for his pain and for his trauma. And so a question came up that why do men find it so difficult to speak about their struggles and their issues? Because obviously then impacts negatively on the family when then they use dysfunctional forms, to kind of deal with their issues. And so the response to that was women are not ready for men to be vulnerable, because societal expectation is that men should be strong. We uphold attributes such as strength, masculinity, competitiveness, and a certain level of aggression in men. We see that as good in society. And so because of that pressure, even the way we parent our sons is different from the way we parent our daughters. And so the men were saying vulnerability in men is women are not ready for that. And I thought, wow, that's an area that could really be explored as to maybe a memoir from a male perspective, describing what they are feeling, what they are dealing with, and see how that one plays out. But there definitely will be a fiction book for teenagers coming up. That is a promise.
Definitely powerful. But I mean, I think if you look at the hope section of A Seed in the Dust, Shumi's adolescent years come through quite powerfully, especially aspects of first, love, teenage love, holiday romance. Like it's so yeah, it's so relatable, but it's also so very skillfully done. How you speak for her really well at the different ages of her life. We've got some more comments in the comment box here. Ruimbo Maricano, wow, profound indeed. It's what you do with your disappointment that matters. And she got quite a lot of love for that comment as well. Then Faith, spoken so powerfully and passionately, Ru. Also true between stimulus and response, there's always a choice. I love that. I love that. Personal responsibility is always very important. James Mugwisi, can't wait for the next offering from a male perspective. Awesome. Thank you for that. And then Wembai Angela, the other tragedy is that of Shumi's father. He represents the man society expects, a headstrong and emotionless man who suffers to the extent of suffering mental illness because he cannot live up to his and his family's expectations. Let's normalize teaching our male child that it's okay to express emotion without battering those around us, and also to process the feelings and experiences that life deals us. Let's talk about these issues and allow the boy child to show emotion and expression without being judged. So it sounds like that upcoming memoir from a male perspective is really going to help us answer some questions. And then from Ruimbo again, where can I get a hard copy? Where can I get a hard copy? Also, Selina, is it possible to be told which books you will be looking at in the future so we can pre-read? Definitely, Ruimbo, we will start making book announcements of where the books are and which books we will be reading in advance so you can read along with us. But Ruramai, where can people get a hard copy of your book today?
Okay, so copies are available in Harare from Wholeness Book Center. It's in Emerald Hill, 84 Broadlands Avenue in Emerald Hill. There's also another agent selling the books in Harare CBD. Her name is Tendai. I can put her phone number in the chat box, maybe towards the end of our meeting. In Bulawayo, I also have books available from Raymond. I'll also put his number. And then in Chiredi, they're available. I have copies that are available. But one can get hold of me on my social media handles, Ruramai Nyadzayo-Mugwisi on Facebook. I am Ru on Instagram, and we can connect, and I can advise you, depending on where you are, where you can pick up a copy.
Awesome. So quite a nice wide distribution network there. And folks, you can also get the book on Amazon. So if you're not in any of those local areas, you can also get the book on Amazon. I think it's available in both formats, Kindle and print on demand. You correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, so it is available in both formats. So you can get it on Amazon, and I urge you to get it. It's a good read, very nice, thought-provoking statements and things to make us think about how we are living our lives. And that's also one of the reasons why I do like memoirs, because sometimes with fiction, it's always easy to kind of distance yourself from the issue because you're like, okay, well, that's happening. But when you know it's something that happened to somebody for real, it's very difficult to put it at arm's length. And you then have to now reckon with yourself and question yourself in terms of some of the things you see in the real life characters of people's real life stories. So very, very powerful and very, very profound. As we're reaching the end of the book club, I feel like we just started. But as we're coming towards the end of the show, before we do the reading, I would just like you to give me your impressions on how it's been going. The book was released earlier in the year. You've had a lot of fanfare on social media, some really amazing conversations about the book, really in-depth reviews and really, some nice moments. What has been surprising about the reception of the book so far?
Okay, so storytelling is like leaving a trail of nuggets or clues to the truth that we're seeking in our own lives, right? So when we pick up a book and read it, the question is, what message is the book conveying? What aspects of the story were worth really, dwelling on? And for this particular book, I had my own idea on what I thought the message was, which is essentially still the same message, but there were different perspectives that then came out from the readers as they read it. And some of the comments, the feedback really has been encouraging. Some of the comments that came back were how people's perspective on certain issues or their assumptions that they had about certain people in society or certain groups of individuals in society, how those assumptions were challenged. For instance, I had a lady come up to me and say she was really challenged about her assumptions of war veterans and what it is that they have gone through post the Liberation War. And she said it allowed her to have a perspective shift, as to what happened to them, and that was really surprising for me. Although, as you said, I portrayed him, Shumi's dad, that is, in as whole manner as I possibly could. Not trying to be overly sympathetic to him, but also trying to shine a light on the issues that may have been missed had the whole story not been told about his life and what happened to him. There was also feedback with some people. One lady in particular came back to me and she said a passion that she had as a child, but she set aside, was rekindled as a result of reading this book. And that came from the way Shumi lived her life. There was a singularity and clarity of purpose that Shumi had as she lived her life. And she said that part of Shumi's life, the way she absolutely believed in something and went gung-ho over anything that she decided was meant for her, made her decide to go back to her love for music and to pursue that. And that was quite a radical shift, seeing that she's a mom, she's a busy mom, and she decided, I'm picking up again and I'm going to pour myself back into this thing that I loved as a child. So there were interesting conversations related to the message surrounding this book. There was a lot of self-awareness as well in terms of how people were dealing with certain issues, which I was expecting, but there was also an awareness of other individuals around them, such as you may judge a certain group of people because you think maybe they're lazy, maybe they're not working hard in life, but maybe they're broken, maybe they're depressed, maybe they're struggling. And if I were to give them a listening ear, we'd be better able to achieve the shared goals that we want to achieve. So there was a lot of surprising lessons that were conveyed as a result of this book, for which I'm truly, truly grateful.
Yeah, definitely. I always say books are like children, right? So you always start out with this idea. You give them a name. You have such an idea that it's going to be like this, and then once the child is out there and having all of these experiences which you have no control over, like that child turns around and shows you who they are, and you're like, wow, I had no idea that you could touch people's lives in this way, or that you could have this kind of impact. So very, very interesting, very, very powerful, and very, very interesting how people took different things from Shumi's narrative. And, I think it's one of those reads where it's got a lot to offer. And I think, so we always say memoir is not history. Memory is not history. But what I did find very, very admirable that I just want to commend before we wrap up is your attention to detail in history. And so you were able to situate Zimbabwe on a global scale, giving us some ideas around the impact of communism, during the sort of early 80s, the Cold War. As time is moving, you were very faithful to how the world was changing. And you gave us really crisp images of each decade. And there were some very, very Zimbabwean things, like obviously Shumi's relationship with her uncle and his passion for soccer, and, her fanaticism or her fangirling of Moses Chunga during, that period of time. And so I found that very, very well done. And I just want to commend you, because it couldn't have been easy layering the book with those things, even when, recounting the time when the Pope came and visited, and what that was like for a lot of Catholic mission schools that were in, that have really been the backbone of what we know our nation as it is today. And, that you were able to bring that into the story. But then there's also the history of the church, because Shumi grows up in a Catholic sort of system of religion, and then she ends up almost in a more of a charismatic system of religion, and what she makes of that and what she makes of her own faith on her own terms is very, very powerful, because you were able to also observe the church with the same kind of compassion, but still also, be I don't want to say critical, but honest. And that we need more of that type of conversation so that we can be better. So I want to commend you for that, and for giving us a book that allows us to look at our cultures, our traditions, our identities, our history, our nationhood, and our faith, and all of the systems that perpetuate these things with honesty, but also with kindness and compassion and wisdom. And I think that this book is going to really be quite a treat, but also quite a good read for the next generation. So unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time. I feel like we only just started to scratch the surface. So you might have to come back again so that we can talk more about some of the other themes in the book. But as we wrap up tonight, would you give us a reading from the book, as is our custom here on the book club? The author always gives us a reading at the end. Ruramai, take it away.
Thank you. Okay. With that, he stood up and walked into the bedroom. My heart fluttered in fear. I had worried about this very moment. Would he suggest that I share his bed? And what would his reaction be if I declined his overtures to seduce me? I had traveled halfway across the country to meet with him, but I had no intention of giving myself to a man, no matter how bewitching his charm, at least not before marriage. For many years, I had believed that I was going to be a nun, fully embracing the significance of the vows that I would take, including the vow of chastity. My mother had instilled in me a deep sense of pride in upholding age-old traditions of purity before marriage in an evolving world which had discarded those same values. My decision to stay chaste was my right and my choice, intertwined and inseparable with my identity and my self-will, both a symbol of the power I had in my control in determining what those choices would be and in choosing my destiny, not just over my body, but also over every other aspect of my life. This liberty was enshrined in my freedom to choose what I perceived was befitting for my life. The reality, though, was a far cry from the truth. I knew I had a right to choose, but I was also a woman. I understood all too well how easily that liberty could be taken away.
Powerful, very, very powerful, and very, very thought-provoking, and very, very deep. Ms. Ruramai, very, very deep. Thank you so much. Thank you. We honor you for your gift, and for all the hard work that you've put into this amazing book. Rita Matande says, please do come back again. Lucy says, fantastic stuff. This was lovely. And Faith says, I have been inspired to delve into exploring African literature more. I used to read so much a long time ago. I've asked Ru and asked everyone here to recommend your favorites. So all of you who have watched with us tonight, please respond to Faith and just reply to her and give her some of your favorites that she can read. But if you haven't read A Seed in the Dust, I urge you to do it. This was worth the wait for me and worth going through. And so thank you again, Ruramai, for this. And thank you all for joining us. We'll be back here next week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. live on Facebook and YouTube on the Thando channel, talking books by African female authors. Have a great weekend and have a great rest of your evening. We love you. Bye.